Welcome back. This is Tim with Tymo Paints channel, and today I'm going to show you guys how to paint base perfectly every single time. But before we get started in the video, I want to let you know that I have created an ultimate estimating guide that'll help you estimate your jobs to make more profits, and it's free, and it'll be the first link in the description below and in the comments. So go ahead and check that out. It's free. It's free of charge. So painting look, I just dropped that paintbrush. So pro tip number one out the gate, if you do spill paint on some floors, don't panic. It's okay. First thing you want to do is get a wet rag and clean it up. Get a wet rag and a dry rag. What I like to do is get a couple different pieces of wet rag or paper towel or some tissue, something like that, because the water makes it want to spread. So you want to get the majority of it up and then use the dampened cloth to really clean it up, to get it all up. Don't let it set, because sometimes you're just going to run into issues and you might have to scrape it off with a putty knife and you run the risk of damaging the floor. So pro tip number one right out the gate, if you do spill on the floor, don't panic. Just get some water, some rags, and clean that stuff right up. So this base has already been prepped. I got it taped here to prevent any kind of issues like getting paint on the floor, which obviously maybe would have been better if I had some tape here. Now, if you're inexperienced and you haven't been doing this for a very long time, it might be wise to get some 6-inch brown masking paper to run along the edges here to just give you a little bit of a bigger buffer zone to set your brush down and for drips and stuff. One thing to keep in mind when you are brushing in is I like to start in the middle, because you have quite a bit of paint on the top of your brush. So you want to start in the middle so you can actually spread it out pretty evenly without having it be too heavy on any one area. And another tip to keep in mind as you're painting is you don't want to let your bristles like flick. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but you kind of want to go at a slower pace. You can't really paint it fast, like swipe back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, because there's going to be these tiny little particles that'll fly off the brush. And on this dark wood floor, you won't notice it right away, but over time you will notice it. So you could see how I'm really laying the brush down and I'm not letting the bristles spring back once I'm done. So that's a good little pro tip to keep in mind once you're doing this. I like to use a real soft bristle brush for these. I prefer the Purdy brushes. This is an Extra Pro Glide 3-inch brush. I've seen a lot of DIY people and other painters use really tiny brushes, like a 1-inch brush, to paint, because you think, oh, I'm only painting this top little edge right here because it's cocked, and then I'm only touching up these tiny little nail holes. I don't need a big old 3-inch brush. Well, with those tiny brushes, you got to constantly be dipping, and they don't really spread the paint as well as a bigger brush. So what I do here is I load up that top edge and I get all my things, all the holes and any kind of discrepancies in the installation covered with paint, and then I like to lay it off. And by laying it off, what I mean is I just take the brush lightly, and with the tip of it I just run it. So you eliminate the fact that you don't want to have a lot of brush strokes, especially on your trim work. So here I'm laying it off. You can see I'm doing a long steady stroke to spread out the paint evenly and to eliminate any kind of brush strokes in the actual base, because base you want to make sure the base is nice and slick. I always dust off the base before. Now I'm always using that duster. Now I can't stress how important it is to have one with you at all times. Just an old crummy paintbrush will totally work for that. Dust everything off first, because once that dust gets wet, it'll raise up and you'll have to sand it down and repaint it again. And we don't want to do that, because right now we're finishing this base. We're giving it the professional feel at the very end. Once we do this, we walk away, the base is done. The base is done. But remember, you got to make sure that you prep it before. And I have another video on that, and I'll go ahead and link that in the end screen. So if you want to paint baseboards after installation for a professional finish, you have to make sure that you go back through and you complete the process by dusting it off, taking a fine finish brush. I prefer a big brush, but you can use a smaller brush. It's fine. And you just slowly take your time and you cut in that top line. Now, don't worry. If you're painting, I'm assuming that you also have the wall paint, the same paint that you used on the wall. So if you do run up on the wall a little bit, it's not a big deal. You could tape it off at a later date and run that wall paint down into it. If you do that and run into that situation where you did get some of the trim paint up onto the wall, you can't really fix it that same day. You're going to want to wait till the next day and use some delicate surface tape, because it's a freshly painted surface. Otherwise, you run the risk of pulling up that coat of paint that you just did, because it might not be fully cured. This trim paint is high enamel, high acrylic, so it takes a little bit of time. Even though it's dry to the touch, that doesn't mean that it's fully hardened and can accept any kind of tape. And if you leave tape on there for prolonged periods, it will always rip it off. So just give it a day. 24 hours is usually a good rule of thumb to wait before taping off your trim in order to, you know, do some touch up if you made some mistakes. I'm pretty good at this, not to like, you know, flex or pat myself on the back, but you could also run a piece of tape up on the wall. And I recommend using frog tape because it does have a gel inside that swells up and prevents leakage, creates a little barrier. But for me, this is much easier for me. I've really learned how to manipulate the brush, and this is something you learn too over experience. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. That I'll leave a link to my free estimating guide and my paint business cheat code. I'm also leaving it in the top comment in the comment section below. So go ahead and check that out. It's free, no free charge. So thanks for sticking around. If you guys like this, make sure to hit subscribe button for more videos like this, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.